Hi there, everybody. My name is Tim Lee. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Retired Teachers Association. We're so happy that you're joining us today. And if you're watching this as a recorded video, we're glad that you're joining us when you have the opportunity. Today, what a privilege to welcome a very special guest and friend of mine. I've known Congressman Brady for going on more than 10 years now, and am so glad that he's able to join us. Congressman Kevin Brady of the Woodlands here in the great state of Texas, and is the ranking member of the House Ways and Means Committee. Mr. Brady, how are you today?
I'm good, Tim. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you so much.
Good.
So obviously today we're going to be talking about the windfall elimination provision, and you've been a national leader voice on reforming this really critical topic. Before we get started, I thought I would just give you a few seconds to say hello to our audience and pass on any other greetings that you'd like, and then we'll kind of dive into some questions.
Great. So first, thanks, Tim. It's an honor. It is an honor to be here with you. Thanks for your friendship and your support. Let me just tell you, you and I have been working on, getting rid of this windfall elimination provision for many years. And to your credit, and especially Representative TRTA, some some groups sort of gave up on it, just didn't think they could find a solution. You stayed at the table with us in Congress all those years, doing what I would say is turning the Rubik's Cube, looking for that solution that worked for our teachers, not just our active teachers, that would have been easier, but our retirees as well, which is a little more complicated, but it's crucial we provide that help. So I just really, want to say thank you for your leadership and for just the relentless effort of TRTA to find a solution. Secondly, I know our members listening today are retired teachers, but again, I just want to say thank you. During this coronavirus, it has been such a challenge for everybody. But boy, our schools responded just beautifully. As you know, both of our boys went to public schools. I have an 11th grader who, our local school district responded like immediately after spring break, got him so involved. Now, other than having apparently the two worst teaching parents in the world, we've done really well because our teachers just in education system, this went out of its way to try to reach out to kids and young, old, everyone to do this. So I just want to thank our retired teachers. They probably have sons or daughters or friends who continue to teach, but it's been a remarkable.
Well, Congressman, I echo your sentiment. I probably learned more Latin and college algebra and chemistry. Woof. I have twins, as you know, and four kiddos in schools all the way from high school to elementary. So I've been learning it all, and I'm not nearly as smart as I thought I was. So I agree entirely. So all right, well let's dig into the subject that you and I have become so familiar with. Congressman Brady, you've been working on resolving the WEP for many years, and the basis of the work that you've been doing is this idea of fairness. Can you give our audience kind of the key points on why we're focused on what you and I call the fairness solution versus, some other solutions that are being talked about?
Yeah, so as you know, we both got involved in this because the WEP is so unfair. It is this one-size-fits-all solution from the 80s that may have looked right on paper, but in real life is very unfair. And especially in states like ours, where our teachers, police, and firefighters are often in a substitute for Social Security, it's particularly unfair. And so we got involved in this just to make sure for example, our teachers who often aren't even aware of this, they working second jobs, summer jobs. They may have a first career, may have a last career after teaching, but in the end get penalized when it's time to retire. So it's never seemed fair at all. And so that's why you and I have worked on our whole goal was equal treatment. Just treat our teachers and police and firefighters like you do others. And so our effort has been to make sure that we repeal the windfall elimination provision the way it is. Let's have a formula that's tailored to you in your life not just one size fits all. And it's proportional in the sense that, the more time you spent in another job, paying into Social Security, summer jobs, first careers, all that, the more the Social Security that you've earned that you keep. It is not perfect by any means, but it is a huge step forward toward equal treatment and is going to get more money into our teachers, including our retirees' pockets, and they've earned it.
Well, I agree with that, and I know that there are several versions of equal treatment bill that we've worked on, and we're going to talk a little bit about how this idea would impact our retiree community as well as our active community. But with the several versions of the WEP fairness bill, developing over time, your current bill, which is HR 3934, what would it do to help our current retirees if we were to see HR 3934 advance in the Congress?
Yeah, so it really has sort of three elements to it. Let's start with, you're an active teacher today, anywhere from 21 to 60 years old. And so, and as you retire, you can get either the new proportional formula, really based on your life's earnings, far better than what we've got right now, or the higher. Maybe WEP in some way treats you better. Great. You get the highest of that in retirement, which means you keep the maximum Social Security you can. For new teachers coming in that are 20 years old today, and they'll be teaching a couple years, they'll have the proportional formula when they retire. But the key was, and what we were so adamant about, was that we don't leave our retirees behind. And because it is sometimes difficult to recreate a whole lifetime of earnings, for a retiree, we just went with a flat $100 in addition a month to retirees of Social Security, plus $50 if they're getting spousal benefits as well. Our thinking was to make sure, A, retirees aren't left behind, and two, let's get as much money into their pocketbooks right now without the bureaucracy, without the IRS having to guess at what they earned throughout their lifetime. This seemed to be the fastest sort of streamlined way to help them.
I want to kind of recap a couple of things so that we can make sure that our audience is hearing the message that we're trying to deliver. And I think that the first part that I heard you talk about was fairness and the proportional formula. This what we've called the equal treatment of public workers conversation. So in that process, the way you and I have talked about it is to eliminate the arbitrary nature of the existing windfall elimination provision. And for most of the folks that will join our association and be involved from the educator community, most of those folks probably would not benefit under the existing WEP. That's why we see so many tens of thousands of Texans or Texas retired teachers that are affected by this. But there are some public worker groups that may have a benefit that is better under the existing WEP than other options for reform. So in the iteration that we have today of 3934, you've been able to work with your colleagues to capture some of the components of the various suggestions over years so that you'll help the most active teachers, the most retired teachers, other public workers. Am I right? And is that kind of the direction that you've been taking?
Yeah, exactly right. Look, Social Security is too complicated, in my view. That's why it causes, I think, so many unintended consequences. With the WEP, certainly, it just punished the people we ought to be rewarding, our educators, our police, our firemen and women, and who, by the way, never got a windfall during their working lives, often had to work second or third jobs just to make ends meet. And so to punish them through the WEP, to continue that was just wrong. But we know too that depending on how many years you've worked in WEP, sometimes you can get a better benefit through WEP. So what we did was combine the best of them, which is get more money into the pockets of teachers. But if for some reason the WEP worked for you, you would get that higher benefit. So we tried to really help both worlds.
I know that in this process, as you said earlier, there's never a perfect solution. There's so many, different categories of folks that we're trying to work with to come up with these solutions. We're going to kind of talk about the steps moving ahead as we, get closer to the end of our discussion. But I know from years and years of working with you that there's another gentleman in Congress who is now the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Richie Neal. He's from Massachusetts. He's been in this, this work with us for a long time. I do want to say a special hello to our friends in Massachusetts. I know they're watching this. The Mass Retirees chairman, as you know, have been at the table with us for years. But my understanding is that Mr. Neal's version of WEP reform also has kind of the linchpin of the whole discussion is fairness. It just seems like the most reasonable, agreeable solutions that we're talking about in Congress are all connected to the idea that we've got to come up with a more fair formula. And again, is that kind of the right assessment of?
Yeah, no, Tim, that is exactly right. And you're right too, both about the Massachusetts teachers have been just crucial through this whole process. Thank you to you as well. But the Chairman Neal's terrific. He has been, he's worked on this issue with me for a number of years, feels just strongly as I do, wants to get this to the president's desk. There have been some differences, but I'll just tell you, as you'd imagine, a Massachusetts Democrat and a conservative Texas Republican may see some things differently. But Richie and I have always been able to work together and find common ground. On this one, we didn't even have to stretch. This is something we both really believe in. And so his bill has some differences in the later out years than my bill, but the heart of it is exactly the same for getting to that fairness and more of the equal treatment. And I'm confident we can find common ground. And we both have said, why can't we get this out of the House? Why can't we advance it this year? I know we've got COVID-19. I know we've got this economy that needs to be recovered. Obviously, we've got big challenges in the issue of race that we need to tackle. But I'm still hopeful, and so is he, that we can try to move our solution, this fairness, out of the House this year. I'm hopeful these other issues don't crowd it out, but that's our game plan.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know that talking about some of the groups that have been at the table with us, our friends here at the Association of Texas Professional Educators, ATPE, they're kind enough to let their members know as well that we're having this discussion today, and we focus on Texas for a second. We have a lot of Texas congressional delegation members that are signing up for a bill. We are asking actually that everybody sign up for both bills if they're not sure which one to exactly support. But what can we do? You can speak to Texas if you'd like specifically, but on a national level, I mean, you're talking right now to teachers and retirees in Illinois and Louisiana and California, Massachusetts, Missouri. If I'd known I was going to start the list, I probably should have had it in front of me because I missed somebody. But this is a national audience. We all want to know, how can we have a more impactful part of advancing these ideas to hopefully, as you said, kind of move it through the process?
Yeah. So I think one, continue the good work you're doing on building support, both in bipartisan support. That really does matter. And as you know, one of our challenges is about a dozen of us states, this has got a huge impact on our teachers and police and firefighters. On the other states, not so much. Although you and I would argue the retirees are in those states, and so I would argue every state has an impact. But we really care about it a great deal more. And so because of those dozen states or so, we've really got to build full support within our states, and we've got to educate, other chairmen of committees, the leadership and all that. And so the work that you're doing, whether it's in Massachusetts, California, or Texas, Louisiana, or Ohio, or the others, we've got to just max out our bipartisan support and continue. I know whenever you guys come to Washington, you do visit with the leadership, about these issues and raise them. That also helps us as well, both in the House and the Senate.
Good. Well, we may touch on the Senate in just a second. There's this sentiment, Congressman Brady, that some of the groups that we're working with, that we should settle for nothing less than full repeal of the WEP and the government pension offset. And you and I both know that just because someone is signed on as a co-sponsor for a particular bill, that's not always the best measure of how those bills are potentially getting traction in the Congress. So for this idea that, doing nothing is more preferred than, doing something just because we're not getting everything that we want all at once. I guess my question is, how many big issues like ours ever come into Congress and people get everything they want, right out of the gate?
Yeah, the short answer is I can't recall many, if at all. And so, look, I agree. The WEP and GPO both need to be addressed for our teachers, police, and firefighters. There's no question about it. But the strategy to just repeal them both, it hasn't worked for 30 years. Actually, more than that. Probably won't for another 30 years, mainly because it would, put a hit on Social Security. We would argue our folks have paid into this. But nonetheless, those other states where this isn't a big issue, they're never going to adopt that approach. And so that's what led us really to, let's find a bipartisan bill, an approach that's more fair and equal treatment, that can be supported by both parties and states no matter where they're at, and the president can sign. And so that's what led us to stay at the table all those years to find a fair, good solution that any president, frankly, including President Trump, has said he will sign this approach if we can get it to them. So I understand the hope for everything goes away tomorrow, but that hasn't worked for way too long. And a lot of teachers and police and firefighters, frankly, they need our help now.
Yeah, well, and kind of pivoting to the moment of now, thousands of our Texas education retirees, they've lost their post, employment, the retirement work has largely been connected to substitute teaching.
Yeah.
And you and I kind of talked about this, early on with the schools having shut down because of the pandemic. A lot of that income has now gone away. Many of these folks are over the age of 65, and they're not working for large incomes. They're working just enough to help pay for things, and whether it's a prescription or go to the doctor or just have some extra income. But with that work drying up, a lot of our folks have come back to us in the organization and said, hey, can you get that WEP thing moving? Because if I could just see some relief, I may not have to depend so much on my school post-retirement work and substitute teaching. So do you think that members in Congress might be, have their hearts softened a little bit more, maybe their minds focused some on the fact that our retirees could really use a fair WEP solution now, especially in light of the fact that so many of them have lost their substitute teaching jobs?
Yeah, the answer is yes. I do think this is an opportunity. One, even though Congress provided about $30 billion to help public schools and other universities offset the cost of remote learning and all the changes that we've seen, at the end of the day, school budgets are still going to be very, very, very tight. And so it's really important. And the other thing, too, is we've seen a lot of retirees, who've been able to put away something. Those savings are much smaller now. And so that raises even more the need to make sure we get them the Social Security they earned. And so, yeah, I think it does help us. That's certainly what Chairman Neal believes as well. We had this conversation I think we're back in Congress 2 weeks ago for a vote. We had this very conversation about another good argument for us on moving this now, not later.
Well, I thanks for having those conversations. And I was going to kind of say this at the end, but a lot of our folks tend to get discouraged, and that comment is one that I hope our members will really think about. And when there's nobody else around, Chairman Neal and you are talking about this issue, trying to find a way to get this to move forward. I always tell our folks that the definition of character is how you act when nobody else is watching. And so I know that because you and I have gotten to know each other so well over the last decade. And I know Chairman Neal enough to know that this is always on your mind. You're always looking for a way forward. So, I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Pivot just a second to government pension offset. A lot of our folks have talked about this. I've always considered the GPO kind of the harder of the two issues to address. The strategy has been, if we can develop a large national coalition and move the easier of the two pieces, the WEP discussion ahead, and find common ground, then maybe we can bring that coalition back to deal with the GPO. Is that the right way to perceive this issue?
Yeah, it really is. I think that's the best strategy. Again, because the proof has been when we link the two and do them all, nothing happens. So we think if we can build momentum in that coalition for WEP, we can do the same thing for the government pension offset. That one's a little more difficult because, on paper, it looks like it treats teachers and police and firefighters better than others. But in real life, that's exactly not the case. And so as much as we've had to educate other states and other members of Congress on WEP, we're going to have to do the same on the government pension offset. And so I also think the approach we're using here on fairness for WEP is exactly what we can use for the GPO as well. So it's really crucial we move this. It's our best shot to actually do even more.
Well, this is an issue that is near and dear to my heart, and I know that on several occasions that I've had an opportunity to testify in front of the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Social Security. I'm pretty sure it was Sam Johnson who was chairman of the subcommittee the times that I was there testifying, and we heard about his passing about a week ago. Sorry to hear that. Such an American war hero, and people can always agree or disagree with politics, but at the same time, Congressman Johnson was always agreeable to letting us come and talk. And the issue that I think he was always concerned about, that he and I talked a lot about, was whatever we do to try to fix the windfall and the government pension offset, we always have to keep our eye on kind of a bigger issue, which is that Texas is a non-mandatory Social Security state, and that some of the efforts that we could put into this may have an impact on our public pension plans in Texas. So the long way to answer or ask the question is, our work seems to be based on fairness, but it doesn't seem to be inviting a bigger conversation about requiring mandatory contributions to Social Security. So on your version of the bill and kind of the work that you're doing, is it right to say that work is based on protecting our TRS plans statewide and not inviting a conversation about mandatory when we may not be ready for that?
Yeah, it is absolutely that case. And as you know, Sam Johnson's services, by the way, are going to be this weekend. So I'm going to go up to Dallas for that. But one of the greatest American heroes ever to serve in Congress, longest serving POW in Vietnam, 7 years, was in isolation many of those years, was in stocks for several of them. Really amazing. But he believed in reforming WEP and GPO. And he also, like you and me, absolutely would fight any effort to make Social Security mandatory for our substitutes. The big worry here is that teachers would pay as much or more for worse benefits. TRS is much more sound than Social Security, and their formula is better. And so I've always said, we shouldn't make TRS look like Social Security. We should make Social Security look like TRS.
Mm-hmm.
Make it sound, make it good for the long term, have it based on real assets, which is exactly what TRS's system does. It's not perfect by any means, but it's really solid. And so, yeah, we're taking an approach that really skirts any effort to try to force those of us, it's our teachers, policemen, firefighters, into mandatory Social Security.
Well, we're getting down to the last couple of questions, and I know you've got kind of a tight time window today. It really does mean so much to me that you're here. So I'm going to ask my final questions, and then we'll kind of get in some last comments. But I've met on several occasions with one of our senators, Ted Cruz in Texas, a year or so ago, probably longer than that now. He filed legislation that was nearly identical to yours, so that we would at least have a vehicle in the Senate to start that conversation. And he's remained, in close contact with our association over the last several years, always asking for, information, what's changed, what's new, how can we help? He met with our executive committee, most of our TRTA leaders the last time we were in Washington. Procedurally, though, does a solution on the WEP, does it really begin in the House, or can help educate us on the procedural process here?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's been a game changer to have a champion in the Senate. Senator Cruz stepped up. We had same conversations about this issue with the White House, who has put it in effect, the proportional in their budget each year, signaling they'll sign this. But the Senator Cruz, by the way, is having bipartisan conversation with Senate Democrat members about this. I think if you ask them, they are, waiting to see if Chairman Neal and I can work out a bipartisan bill that has broad-based support in the House before they really begin the concentrated efforts. I know they're educating, their colleagues on this issue, which is hugely helpful. So yeah, and I know Senator Cruz, last time I talked to him, was having good conversations with some of the Senate Democrats on this, but they too, I think, would like to see if Richie and I can't work this out and get this moving for the momentum. So that's sort of the strategy at this point. I think it is the best way to get it done.
Great. So getting down to the last question or two. So Congressman Brady, we're grateful for your time and your endless work on ending the unfair windfall. You and I have gotten to know each other, and I know the answer to this question before I even ask it, but I want our audience to know how you feel about it. Some say that Congress will never change the WEP. Do you believe we will resolve this issue?
The absolute answer is yes, we will. We have too many of us have worked too long. It's too important to so many of our teachers, police, and firefighters. Social Security is complicated, and they tend to resist many changes to it. I get all that, and I know that not all states are as interested as we are, engaged in it as we are, but I think we've built the support. The solution really matters on fairness. I'm absolutely convinced we can get this done, and Chairman Neal does too. As a matter of fact, I know it's easy, to look back and get a little discouraged or disheartened by this, but look, if it's worth doing, it's worth just staying at it till we get it done. And that's what I'm going to do. That's what I know what you're going to do. And I feel confident Chairman Neal will as well. So yeah, we can tell your members, don't get discouraged, stay engaged in this thing. I think we're getting so close. I can just smell it. So stay in there, hang in there.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm going to just kind of recap a few of the things that we've talked about today as my parting comments, and then I'm going to ask for any parting words from you. So we had an opportunity to talk about why we're focused on fairness. We talked about it as sort of the bedrock foundational element of both your version, 3934, HR 3934, as well as Mr. Neal's version, I think is HR 4540. Those may have some differences in the overall bill and how they may help retirees, but we're not leaving the retirees behind on a WEP solution. We all agree that we've got to find something to do to help our retirees. We're focused on trying to move this as quickly as possible. We've added to our discussion the idea that a lot of our retirees have lost their job as substitute teachers, and wanting to try to use that as a way to advance the issue. The government pension offset has not left our minds. We are talking about it. Right. It is a more difficult issue to resolve, but a strong national coalition will help us get that done. We are designing a solution that's intended to protect our state public pension benefits, but and at the same time be fair to our retirees. So we are not trying to develop any action that would invite a conversation about the long-term Social Security issue, mandatory Social Security. So if we have some national partners that are concerned about that, I'm going to ask that they contact y'all's office and make sure they have that assurance and that connection. And, we're working a Senate strategy. We're doing the best that we can there. The Senate's kind of waiting on the House to take some action. And the last thing I heard you say was probably the most important thing. Don't ever give up. If we want to win, we have to be engaged in the discussion. And so walking away thinking that nothing will ever happen may be the worst thing that could happen to our cause at this particular moment. Anything that I missed?
No, you knocked it out of the park. And we do all of that while protecting Social Security as it is, so other states can be reassured, that fixing this problem makes no changes, to the solvency of Social Security. We got to work on that, by the way, but this bill leaves that intact. And so, I think we've got, and Chairman Neal and I, we do have some differences. I know we can work it out. It is really differences looking out 40 to 50 years. Whenever one of the peculiarities of anything touching Social Security is they always want to know to the dollar the impact in 75 years. Well, as you know, that's a big guess. So right. We have continued to work with Social Security actuary, the accountant for the agency, and others, and we're just solving one final problem here, and then we believe we have support to move this. And I know too, I know our House leadership on the Republican side gets it, is supportive. He's been building that same support among Speaker Pelosi and others in California, hugely helpful as well. So I think we've got a lot of the foundation set to move this. Well, Congressman,
thank you so much for being here. Personally, it means
thank you, Tim.
To me. We're very grateful for what you're doing. Please be safe. I know these are troubling times. People who may not know you as well as I do, such a down-to-earth, easygoing, honest, just very approachable individual. And as a public servant, you give up so much. And I really do appreciate the work that you do to help our retirees. And when we get done with this effort and we have fixed this issue, doesn't matter to me where or how it's going to happen. I'll find some way to get there with you, and we'll watch and make sure it gets done all the way. We will. We'll make sure you're in the gallery, because for all the years you've worked on it and all the supporters from our states that have come together and stayed at the table, you deserve to be a big part of this victory. And we just got more work to do, but we can do it. Thanks for your leadership. Thanks for your friendship too, Tim. Thank you, Congressman. Have a great day. We appreciate it. You too. Thanks. All right. Bye-bye. Bye now.